The sun was shining brightly over Arlington National Cemetery. A soft wind moved through the trees, carrying with it a feeling of peace and respect. People from different parts of the country had gathered there to watch the changing of the guard at the tomb of the unknown soldier, a place where silence speaks louder than words. Every visitor knew they were standing on sacred ground where countless heroes had been honored for their service and sacrifice. Among the quiet crowd that day, a deep rumble suddenly cut through the air. It was the sound of a motorcycle approaching. Heads turned as a man wearing a black leather jacket and sunglasses rode up, the roar of his engine breaking the stillness. He parked his bike too close to the ceremonial area, where vehicles were not supposed to be. A few people frowned, but he didn't seem to notice or care. He looked around with a smirk, chewing gum as if he were at a casual park, not a national monument. The biker took off his helmet and leaned against his motorcycle, watching the crowd gather near the white marble tomb. When an elderly man politely told him, "Sir, this is a place of respect. You should keep quiet," the biker just laughed and said, "Relax, old man, I'm just watching." His careless words made some people uncomfortable. The ceremony began. From the corner of the plaza, a tomb guard appeared, dressed in a crisp uniform, shining shoes, and white gloves. His movements were precise, every step measured, every turn sharp. The crowd went silent. The sound of his boots striking the ground echoed through the air, steady and strong. The guard's face showed complete focus and discipline. It was more than a duty. It was a promise to the fallen soldiers, one that he would never break. But the biker didn't seem to understand the meaning behind the moment. He started whispering to someone on his phone, laughing softly, disturbing those nearby. A woman turned to him and said, "Please, sir, this is an important ceremony." Instead of stopping, he rolled his eyes and said, "It's just a soldier walking back and forth. What's the big deal?" People couldn't believe his disrespect, yet the guard remained calm, continuing his march without showing any emotion. His dedication didn't waver, even as the biker's careless behavior distracted others. As the guard turned to march again, the biker decided to move closer. He walked toward the line marked for visitors, ignoring the sign that said, "Do not cross." He stepped forward just as the guard was turning, and in that single careless moment, his shoulder brushed hard against the soldier. The impact made the guard stumble for half a second before regaining his balance. The crowd gasped in shock. A few people stepped forward, ready to confront the biker. But the tomb guard didn't fall or lose his posture. He straightened his shoulders, adjusted his rifle, and returned to his position with absolute calm. His eyes met the biker's for a brief moment. Not angry, not hateful, but firm and full of pride. That look said more than any words could. It was a reminder that respect isn't just a rule here. It's sacred. The biker blinked, unsure how to react. For a moment, the smirk on his face faded. Then, trying to act tough again, he gave a short laugh and muttered, "Didn't mean to bump you, soldier." But the crowd didn't laugh. They stood silent, many of them shaking their heads in disbelief. The guard turned, his boots striking the ground with purpose. His voice, calm yet strong, echoed through the air. "It is requested that everyone maintain silence and respect." Those words were not loud, but they carried the weight of history. The biker froze. Even he couldn't ignore the power in that steady tone. The crowd, which had been holding its breath, fell completely silent again. The guard continued his march as if nothing had happened, every movement perfect, every step precise. The biker stood there, suddenly unsure of himself. He could feel the eyes of everyone around him. The same people who had been quiet before were now staring at him, not with anger, but with disappointment. A few minutes later, 2 security officers appeared at the edge of the plaza. They had seen what happened through the cameras and began walking toward the biker. One of them spoke softly but firmly, asking him to step back. The biker didn't argue. He just nodded and stepped away from the path, his earlier arrogance slowly fading. The ceremony continued just as it always did, with grace and discipline. The guard never broke his focus, never showed emotion. It was as if nothing could shake his devotion to the fallen. Even after being bumped, he stood tall, representing every soldier who had ever served. When the ceremony ended, people began to whisper quietly again. Some talked about the guard's professionalism, others about the biker's behavior. A few visitors, including the elderly man from earlier, walked up to one of the officers and said, "That guard deserves a medal for keeping his composure." The biker, still standing near his motorcycle, looked at the tomb one last time. Something about the guard's calm strength stayed with him. He had never seen such discipline before. For the first time that day, he felt out of place, like he didn't belong in that moment of honor and silence. As he put on his helmet and started his bike, he glanced at the tomb guard again. The guard didn't look back. He continued his perfect march, eyes forward, shoulders straight, every movement symbolizing pride, respect, and duty. The biker drove away. But the sound of the guard's voice and the weight of that one sentence, maintained silence and respect, and stayed in his mind. He didn't know it yet, but that short encounter would change the way he saw respect, service, and sacrifice forever. After the brief but tense encounter, the air at Arlington National Cemetery remained heavy with silence. Visitors whispered quietly among themselves, sharing what they had just witnessed. Some shook their heads in disbelief at the biker's behavior, while others praised the tomb guard for his remarkable discipline. The guard, meanwhile, continued his precise march without a single sign of disturbance. His face was calm, expressionless, and yet it carried an unmistakable strength that seemed to fill the entire plaza. The biker, leaning against his motorcycle, finally seemed to notice the weight of the moment. The initial arrogance and smirk that had been on his face when he arrived had faded. Instead, a flicker of unease appeared in his eyes. He had never seen someone remain so perfectly composed under provocation. The crowd's eyes, silently judging him, made him feel even smaller. For the first time that day, he realized that his careless actions had consequences beyond what he imagined. Nearby, a group of veterans watched quietly. Their faces were stern, their expressions unyielding. They had served in the military, many of them in situations far more dangerous than a simple ceremony, yet they could feel the disrespect in the biker's behavior. Without a word, they began to approach the scene, their footsteps deliberate, as if the presence of those who had sacrificed so much added weight to the atmosphere. The tomb guard paused briefly to adjust his stance, the rifle in his hands perfectly aligned with his body. He turned slightly to acknowledge the crowd's murmurs, but never once looked angry at the biker. His discipline was not about punishment. It was about honor, tradition, and respect. His calmness seemed to say, "I will not be drawn into chaos, and neither will this sacred place." The biker shifted uncomfortably. He wanted to laugh it off, to act like it was just a small mistake. But the intensity in the guard's eyes and the silent judgment of the veterans made it impossible. The officer who had approached him earlier now stood closer, speaking quietly but firmly. "Sir, please step away from the ceremonial area. This is a place of respect." The biker nodded, muttering something about how he didn't mean any harm. But his voice lacked conviction, and the truth was clear to everyone around him. He had overstepped, and he knew it. For a brief moment, he felt a heavy weight of shame. It was a strange feeling, unlike anything he had felt before. In his life, he was used to being in control, to laughing at rules and boundaries. Yet here, in this sacred place, he had no control, and that realization stung. The ceremony continued. The tomb guard's every movement was sharp, calculated, and flawless. He turned, stepped, and pivoted with exact precision. The rhythm of his march seemed to echo through the hearts of everyone present. Even the biker could not ignore it. Each step the guard took reminded him that respect and discipline were not empty words. They were values that had been earned through years of training and sacrifice. Visitors began to record videos quietly on their phones, capturing the guard's perfection and the biker's awkwardness. Social media posts would later describe the scene in detail, praising the guard for his composure and highlighting the biker's moment of embarrassment. But in that moment, no one cared about likes or shares. The focus was on the living embodiment of honor and dignity before them. As the biker watched, he noticed something he hadn't before. There was no anger in the guard, no desire for revenge. The guard's strength came from his ability to remain calm under pressure, to maintain his focus even when faced with disrespect. The biker felt a twinge of guilt, realizing that his behavior had disrupted a sacred tradition and disrespected countless soldiers who had served and sacrificed for their country. The veterans standing nearby began to nod at one another, acknowledging the guard's unwavering professionalism. One of them, a man who had served decades in the army, whispered softly to the person next to him. He could have lost his temper, but he didn't. That's real courage. Real strength is standing tall when others try to push you down. The word struck the biker deeply. He had never been in a situation where someone's discipline and dignity made him feel small. He had always valued physical power, speed, or bravado, but here he understood that true strength came from self-control and respect. The officers now guided him a few steps away from the ceremonial area. He didn't resist. Instead, he looked at the tomb guard again, and for the first time, he felt genuine respect. It was not fear, and it was not admiration for an act of aggression. It was something deeper. The guard represented a tradition, a legacy, and values that went beyond any one person. The biker realized that he had momentarily violated something far more important than the rules of a cemetery. He had challenged a symbol of honor itself. As he moved back, the biker tried to understand why he had acted the way he did. The laughter, the smirk, the arrogance, it had been a defense mechanism, a way to appear confident in front of others. But in this setting, nothing could hide ignorance or disrespect. Every step the guard took reminded him that he had been wrong, and the shame began to grow. Finally, the ceremony ended, and the crowd began to disperse slowly, many stopping to watch the guard complete his final steps. Visitors whispered among themselves, praising his composure and talking about how even a single moment of disrespect could not shake him. The biker remained still, his motorcycle parked nearby, unsure whether to leave or apologize. Deep down, he knew he had learned a lesson that day, one that could not be erased or ignored. He glanced at the guard one last time. The soldier stood perfectly tall, shoulders squared, rifle in hand, and eyes forward. There was a quiet pride in his stance, a silent message that resonated far more than words could. Respect must be given, not taken, and true strength comes from self-control. As the biker mounted his motorcycle and started the engine, he felt a strange mix of emotions. Guilt, respect, and admiration swirled together in his mind. He knew that what he had witnessed would stay with him forever. The image of the guard, unwavering and disciplined, burned into his memory. Even though he had initially seen the day as just a fun visit, it had turned into a lesson on respect, honor, and humility. The roar of his motorcycle faded as he drove away, but the lessons of Arlington National Cemetery stayed with him. Every step of that guard, every calm word, and every precise movement became a standard he would never forget. He understood that respect is earned, that discipline is strength, and that true heroes do not need to fight to prove their courage. In the days that followed, the biker could not shake the memory. Every time he thought of that day, he remembered the silent dignity of the tomb guard, the whispers of the veterans, and the weight of the crowd's judgment. He realized that the lesson he had learned was far more valuable than any moment of arrogance or laughter he had once prized. And so, in that quiet moment on the sacred ground of Arlington, a spark of change was planted. The biker had been humbled, and although he didn't know it yet, karma was preparing to guide him toward a path of understanding, respect, and redemption, a journey that would alter the course of his life forever. Days passed after the incident at Arlington National Cemetery, but the biker couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the tomb guard standing perfectly tall, his rifle in hand, his eyes calm and unwavering. The memory of that disciplined stare and the weight of his words echoed in the biker's mind. It is requested that everyone maintain silence and respect. He had thought of it as just a sentence at first, but now it felt like a lesson he couldn't ignore. The biker tried to return to his normal life, riding his motorcycle through the streets, laughing with friends and joking about everything. Yet nothing felt the same. Even small things reminded him of that day. The way he had acted without thinking, the embarrassment he had felt, and the silent strength of the guard. He realized that disrespect had consequences, even when they were not immediate, and that pride could be humbled by a simple act of discipline. One rainy evening, as he was riding home, something unexpected happened. His motorcycle broke down in the middle of a deserted street. The rain poured heavily, drenching him to the bone. He tried everything he knew, checking the engine, adjusting the spark plugs, testing the wires but nothing worked. The bike would not start. Panic and frustration began to rise in him, the same kind he had once felt as anger or annoyance when things didn't go his way. Just as he was about to give up, a group of men approached. They were older, wearing simple jackets, and carried an air of calm authority. Without asking for anything in return, they offered to help. They guided him to a nearby shelter, dry and warm, where he could wait safely for the rain to stop. The biker was surprised. These men could have ignored him, left him in the rain, or even scolded him for his reckless riding. But they didn't. They helped him quietly, without a word of judgment. Inside the shelter, he saw something he had never expected: portraits of soldiers, flags, and symbols honoring veterans. The room was filled with a quiet pride, just like Arlington had been. The biker realized that the men who had helped him were the same kind of people he had mocked without thinking, people who had given their lives, or risked everything, for their country and their community. Over the next few weeks, he returned to that shelter several times. He began volunteering in small ways, helping organize meals, cleaning the floors, delivering supplies, and listening to the stories of veterans. Each visit humbled him further. He heard tales of bravery, sacrifice, and honor that he could never have imagined. The lessons from Arlington came alive in the words of the men he now respected deeply. One day he decided to return to Arlington National Cemetery, but this time on foot. He carried a folded American flag in his hands, the kind that is given at memorial services to honor fallen soldiers. The weather was calm, the sky clear, and the air carried the same solemnity he had felt before. As he approached the tomb of the unknown soldier, he noticed the same guard standing at attention, still calm, still precise. The biker waited quietly as the ceremony concluded. His heart pounded, and his hands trembled slightly as he approached the tomb. He knelt down and placed the flag on the ground, whispering a heartfelt apology. "I'm sorry for what I did. I didn't understand before, now I do. Thank you for showing me respect, patience, and discipline." The guard did not speak. He simply nodded slightly, acknowledging the gesture. His silent approval felt heavier and more meaningful than any words could have been. At that moment, the biker realized that true respect isn't given lightly, nor is it earned with words alone. It comes from understanding, humility, and sincere actions. The experience changed him deeply. He became more mindful in every part of his life: how he treated others, how he behaved in public, and how he approached challenges. He understood that arrogance and carelessness could lead to embarrassment, but humility and respect could lead to trust and admiration. Every time he thought of the tomb guard, he remembered that discipline and calmness were stronger than aggression or mockery. Months later, the biker returned to the shelter regularly. He began helping with larger projects, organizing veteran events, raising awareness about their needs, and volunteering for community work. His friends noticed the change too. The once loud, reckless biker had become quiet, reflective, and deeply respectful. People who had known him before were amazed at how much he had grown in character and maturity. He often told the story of that day at Arlington to others, not to boast about himself, but to teach the lesson he had learned. He explained how one moment of disrespect had led to a humbling experience and how a simple act of patience and discipline had changed his entire perspective. Children, teenagers, and even adults listened carefully. They could see the sincerity in his eyes and the change in his behavior. Over time, the biker understood that karma is not always about punishment. Sometimes it is about teaching lessons in subtle ways, giving people the chance to grow, change, and make better choices. The breakdown of his motorcycle, the help from strangers, and the calm dignity of the tomb guard all became part of a larger pattern, guiding him toward understanding, empathy, and respect. Years later, he continued to visit Arlington National Cemetery, but he never disturbed the peace again. Each visit was quiet and reflective. He watched the guards march with admiration, no longer mocking, no longer careless. He felt a deep connection to the values they represented, and every time he passed by the tomb, he silently saluted, remembering the lesson he had learned and the moment that had changed him forever. Through this experience, the biker transformed from someone reckless and disrespectful into someone mindful, caring, and responsible. He realized that life often teaches lessons in unexpected ways, and sometimes the most powerful lessons come from people who do not say a word, but act with integrity. The tomb guard, with his unwavering composure, had become a symbol of strength and inspiration, not only for the country but for one man who had needed to learn the meaning of true respect. In the end, the biker's journey became a story of redemption, growth, and understanding. He had faced the consequences of his actions, experienced humility, and learned the value of discipline and honor. His life was forever changed because he had encountered someone who stood tall, even when knocked down, A man whose silence spoke louder than any words and whose actions taught a lesson that would never be forgotten. And so, the story of that one day at Arlington National Cemetery became more than just an incident. It became a reminder that respect, patience, and discipline hold power far greater than arrogance or carelessness. Karma, in its quiet way, had guided the biker to understand the deeper meaning of honor, and he embraced it fully, carrying it with him for the rest of his life.